Okay, let's call the meeting agenda to order, please. Let the roll call the roll call show that everyone is here, believe it or not. Yes, he's here. We need a motion to approve the agenda. So moved by Joe, seconded by Scott. All those in favor signify by saying aye. Motion, you all got a copy of the minutes with your emails, so if you've reviewed them, any questions? Otherwise, I need a motion to approve.
I so move.
Motion by Scott, seconded by Doug. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Okay, yes. Pardon? Oh, yeah, we've got two of them. Okay, you did. Scott Yunke. All right. First off, register and probate. You are up, and district attorney is also up. Did you make a request in writing to me, Julie?
No, I did not. Matt spoke with me and said that he would put me on the agenda.
Yes. What I'd like you to do, because the Corporation Council is reviewing that work from home policy, okay?
Okay.
If you would do this for us, is if you would put a request in on what it is that you want, we'll get it to him. All right?
Okay.
And that way, let's see how we can incorporate this in, because I understand we're going to see a bunch of these requests coming in. If we know what we're dealing with, and we have it in written form, we have something that we can work with, okay?
Okay. Sure.
If that'll work for you,
That's fine. Yep.
I appreciate it much, Julie.
No problem.
Thank
Did
you
you
very
want
much.
me to speak or
I-
just put in the request?
If as long as you're putting a request in, I don't think it's you can if you wish, but I just as soon as everything you have is in writing, that way we can distribute materials to everyone,
Okay.
and we'll make sure that the Corporation Council gets it also.
Okay. Sounds
All
good.
right.
Thank you.
And it same goes for my.
Yeah, I got her. Yeah, we'll do it. I was just gonna ask for emergency basis. That's all I was. gonna do.
And I understand that. Yeah. And I can certainly understand where your thinking is from there. Yeah, just let's put it in writing so we have it, and we'll make it short, sweet, and then I'll pass it on to him, and we'll go from there.
Sounds good.
Sounds
And
good.
thank you very
Okay,
much
thank
for
you.
both of you for
Take care.
coming. Okay, emergency management. You're up, Tracy.
All right, so everyone got the 2022 budget to date. Did anyone have any questions in regards to it? Because everything looks like it's right on schedule.
Okay,
Okay, any questions in regards to the 2023 budget status? I have submitted that to Scott and Paul, and we've got our proposed budget back from Scott. And then you guys probably all got a copy of that as well. So is there any questions on what the proposed 2023 budget is for emergency management?
tell you the truth, we got it last night. And if, unless somebody stayed up until all hours of the morning, I don't think anyone has looked at it yet, including me.
Okay, well, I don't know if there was anything on there that I really needed to point out as being of concern. Pretty much, the only thing that changed is an increase under the Point Beach funding, under the emergency notification system, because if iPause gets approved through FEMA, that's $1,800 a year. And then that will be added to Point Beach budget side of it. So. And iPause is the integrated public alert warning system, in which it allows us to send wireless emergency alert notifications to anyone with a smartphone here in the county. So whether they're county residents, people traveling through, whatever it is, it's a greater ability to reach out to more people in the event of an emergency. Okay, so next is review upcoming training exercises. So we just held a public information officer workshop on August 23rd. I am down at least 2 public information officers due to people taking alternate jobs or leaving the county. So we are looking for additional people to serve in those roles. They just help, with the plans and procedures for public information, the pre-scripted messages when it comes to nuclear plant drills and exercises. If we had to utilize social media, whether it's for Point Beach or if it was a real incident. And then our web EOC, the state has a website that we utilize that public information would be uploading information. So it's nothing that is nothing real difficult. It's just a matter of trying to find individuals willing to do that. It's easier having county employees because they're more used to our computer system. So we're reaching out for that. The local emergency planning committee tabletop exercise, which was held last week, Wednesday, that went very well. We had 50 to 60 people participate, emergency responders, the Luxembourg Casco School District, some of the private entity. So it just had to do with an extremely hazardous incident at a set location in which we just had emergency responders and how they're going to respond to sending messages out to the public, how they're getting information to their first responders, what they can do. But yeah, that went pretty well. Any questions on training and exercises? All right,
How did your tabletop work out for you?
the one I just mentioned,
Yeah,
it went well. Again, we had about 50 to 60 people. We had fire, Luxembourg Fire, Green Bay Metro, EMS, some of the businesses in the area, law enforcement, the state. We had EPA there and DNR. They all participated.
okay.
So with that, I'll be coming up to the next grant that I applied for in just a moment. So next on there is the Clean Sweep online registration is open. So again, Clean Sweep is October 22nd from 8 until noon. The grant that Emergency Management applied for is covering household hazardous waste, agricultural, dry pharmaceuticals. We also take fire extinguishers, old ammunition, sharps containers, public health takes sharps containers. And then this year I'm working with Raymond James, the Bank of Luxembourg branch, in which they have an entity coming in doing an electronic collection. There is fees for some of the electronics. That is all listed on the online registration, as well as some of the flyers that are going around through the county. So with that, we're always looking for volunteers to help out. So if any county board person would like to help out, we are more than willing to have them. And plus their time counts as our match, because it is I think it's a 70-30 match. The next on there is hazardous materials emergency preparedness grant. So I reached out in July for a grant under that, in which Kewaunee County is awarded almost $25,000. That will be for a consultant to come in and kind of go off of the tabletop exercise we did last week. So it's got to be an extremely hazardous transportation event. And we just had our first initial planning meeting last night. And all of this will be completed by March of 23. Before I get to F, I just wanted to touch on a few other things. So our office has been working on getting some memorandum of understanding. We recently got one with Quick Trip. So in the event of a disaster happening here in Kewaunee County, we have an MOU with them that helps make sure that fuel and maybe some convenience store items are available to residents, as well as emergency response. We also got transportation memorandum of understanding with the Algoma School District. And then working on some memorandum understandings with the grocery stores in the event we ever had to open up a feeding location due to a large incident happening here in Kewaunee County. With that, we do have one in place with IGA and working on the one with Piggly Wiggly right now. Just wanted to mention the outdoor sirens. So of the 13 that were scheduled to come down, being paid for by Point Beach, 4 of them are still up. They were erroneously forgotten. So anyways, I did reach out to Point Beach. They're going to make sure those come down, but we're looking at it's going to be sometime in 2023 that those remaining 4 come down. All right, alternate work site policy discussion. So just real quick,
Do
do a writing.
it in writing. That's not.
Okay.
We all know it's gonna come
All right.
up.
All right, that'll work. Any questions on anything I mentioned? Well, we can use some volunteers. Are you offering? So, right, John shows up at the last minute usually. Usually Gary Poppy helps, but this year he cannot. So it's always nice to have 1 or 2 elected officials, whether it is county board or local elected officials there. That way when residents are coming in, they're seeing that you guys are participating. You know, we get $10 per hour for your participation. So again, that goes towards an in-kind match towards this grant. You know, emergency management is going to be there. We've got public health, law enforcement is there. Veolia comes in, they take care of all of the chemical handling and disposing of, so nobody needs to help with that. The Bank of Luxembourg is supposed to be providing 1 or 2 individuals in regards to the electronic portion, because again, that's their area. We have a few things where fees are collected. It's nice to maybe have 1 or 2 people on hand to help collect those fees. Even though we do online registration, we like to check them off when they come in, just to show that they did come in, because it helps us keep track of how many people came through that registered and how many that didn't register, because that's information I supply to the state when I do my grant closeout. The other thing is then registering those that just happen to show up, collecting certain information for that. Again, I use that information for the grant closeout. So
And that's October 22nd.
Saturday, October 22nd. Starts at 8 o'clock, that people start coming through, and we don't allow anyone to come through after noon.
Any other questions for Tracy?
We bring donuts and coffee. It's a long day. You know, with the online registration, we do it so people get spread out between that 8 and noon time period. So that way, when we're there, we don't have long periods of time where nobody's coming through. By doing that, there's continual people throughout the whole time frame coming through.
Okay. Any other questions for Tracy? Hearing no other questions. Jason, you're up.
Okay, Lieutenant Chris Van Aram is here too, and as we go through these things, he may speak up and add some discussion to what I bring up. But we'll start with the budget. For this year's budget, in going through it, we knew that fuel was going to be high and vehicles. I think we've explained that before. What happened? We ordered 2022 Dodge Chargers. They decided not to make the police package this year. They changed it to 2023 and they're not honoring our estimate, that our quote. So we're going to have to pay whatever the 2023 rate is. And off the top of my head, I believe it went up about $3,000 per car. So Paul knows about that and he is working on a budget transfer to be able to get those items covered. We have to continue with the rotation that we have. Just to give you an idea, we always recycle any cars that are good enough and we use them for school liaison cars for a couple more years. One of our school liaison cars went down. It's not worth fixing. We shipped it already to have it sold. We also have one patrol car that we are limping by. There's some struts and stuff that should be fixed. It's about $2,500. Because we're hoping that these cars come in the next couple months. We're not fixing that right now. So we do have one spare squad car that we've been using, and we've been trying not to use the one with the struts that are bad. But in keeping with a 5-year rotation, we keep from these real high costs of something like a transmission or engine going out historically. If we keep them longer than that, we have major problems, it seems. So we're hoping to keep one of the 2 cars that we are trading in this year to use as the recycle as the school liaison officer's car. And then we need these 2 new cars to replace those 2. For next year's budget, there hasn't been a whole lot of changes. We raised the fuel in line with what we've been paying this year, thinking it's probably going to continue for a while. The vehicles, we do have quotes for next year, and they went up again. So I think from last year to next year, it's about $5,000 difference in the vehicles. And we have no control over that, right? It's just something we have to do, but I know that's going to hit the private sector the same way. So that's what you can expect with vehicles going up. The only other thing that I can think of offhand that we raised really was, we got the body cams and we have more licensing than what we had in the past. So it's not that big of a jump, but we do have some licensing and stuff that went up that we have to pay yearly fees on.
Are you sticking with all cars, or are you gonna throw a couple of SUVs in there too?
Next year, we're going with SUVs. And the reason we're going with SUVs is we have 2 to trade in, and we can reuse a lot of the equipment on them. It actually would cost probably $2,000 more to go with the Chargers, which would even out the price. But the SUVs will be worth more when we trade them in. So because we're trading in SUVs, it's cost efficient to stick with SUVs. Paul looked at those numbers too, and he agreed with them. The other, we get more for trade-in on the SUVs. And one other thing we have to think about is we have to keep a few SUVs in our fleet, because we have some individuals that are, I don't know what Justin Newman is, 6'4", 6, something like that. He doesn't fit in a car. So, a couple of our individuals that are bigger people have to go in the SUVs. So it works out well to just trade in an SUV for an SUV, and that's what we happen to have this coming year. So overtime, we'll get to that later, but I'm actually really happy with it. It looks like it's high, but if you take the grant off, we are absolutely in line with the last 2 years. Very, very similar. So we'll get to that when we get there. A couple other things that I seen were high, interpreters, but it's a small budget item, $1,200. We're at pretty much 100% of that already. That's going to go over. We have no control over, who we pull over or who we have to deal with when you have to call an interpreter, because we can't communicate. We have to call an interpreter. Recruiting and screening is up, and that's probably going to continue to be up next year. We did raise that very slightly, knowing that we're going to have more people to hire just to stay in line. Our gas, and fuel is way up. And other than that, little things like postage, nothing very concerning to us. Any questions on it? Okay, staffing. I'm going to try and explain this. We actually had Paul and Scott come, and we went on a whiteboard and we drew this all out. So bear with me here. I have quite a bit to explain, but I guess I want to start with our current situation because it kind of leads into the future. This year, we started out the year, we might as well say 5 positions down. We were 4 down January 1st. We knew that we were down, and we had already begun the process of recruitment and hiring, and we were ready to hire 2 pretty much January 1st. 1 more person left in January. That was a surprise. So in January, we were 5 positions down at the sheriff's department. We started hiring right away in January. So we had started the previous year already, the process of posting for the jobs and stuff. We can only train 2 people at a time. We're working on ways to possibly increase that, but it works well to train 2 at a time. By the time you put people on different shifts and stuff, we're kind of stumbling over each other. And if you've been in our dispatch center, we can't put 2 people in the dispatch center and have them work on separate consoles, plus have a trainer over their shoulder. There's not even enough room in there for 4 people to train. So we've been training 2 at a time. Most postings that we have, we get 1 or 2 good candidates. That's important to know too, because we can't just have a posting and hire 5 people. That almost never happens. So in this year, we've posted about 4 times. We've taken the best candidates. We usually hire 1 or 2, and we train those as soon as one of the 2 people we're training is done with training. We've had 1 person resign that started training and decided this wasn't for him. He resigned, and that's kind of normal. We kind of anticipate about 1 in 4 either resigning or not making the training. So that all being said, right now we have 2 people in training and we have 1 open position. That open position won't be filled by the end of the year. We'll probably, well, we'll have somebody there, but they won't be trained and we won't be able to utilize them until next year. All that being said, if you think about it that way, we had 5 positions this year. We hired pretty much as fast as we could, and we'll have 4 of them filled and we'll have 1 more open. That gives us a timeline of how it's worked in the past to be able to hire and train people. By January 2025, so the jail is anticipated to open, the new jail, April of 2025. We would like to have people, and it makes sense, at least 3 months before that be fully staffed. So January of 2025 being fully staffed. So let's start with that. We have 5 new positions we have to hire for. We have, on the side of that, we have 8 people eligible for retirement by age at the sheriff's department. If I had to guess, and we talked about this with all of our management, it isn't just my wild guess, and it's some people telling us when they plan on retiring. The first one will probably be November of 2025. If we look at that, we're probably going to have 5 of those 8 people retire before January of 2025. So we have the 5 open positions, the 5 retirements, and then historically, on the low end, we have 1 person surprise us a year that leaves. So we can plan on 3 people leaving us before January of 2025 if we look at our history. So that's 13. Then if we hired 13 people, we average about 1 in 4 not making it through training, either because they quit or they leave. At the very low end of that, let's just say 2 people don't make training or leave. That's 15 people we have to hire by January of 2025. All right, so now that you have that in mind. Sometimes it's easier to see things on paper. Let's start with the one that's not colored and just talk about that. That is our typical hiring process, and we try to shorten this, but it's a lot of things are very difficult to shorten. In the past, this committee has allowed us to have ongoing recruitment. And our thought there was we take applications all the time. When we have an opening, we interview those applicants and we hire somebody, hopefully. Our problem with that ongoing recruiting is people apply, and by the time we're ready to say, okay, we're going to hire, most of those candidates are gone. To hire law enforcement officers right now, it's very difficult. People are scarfing them up right along. The NWTC class that graduated last spring, I don't know exactly how many people there were. There are usually about 30 people in a class. All but 2 of them had jobs before they graduated. So if you wait until they graduate and then you try to hire them, it's very difficult. There's nobody left. So this gray sheet kind of outlines it. It seems to work better when we actually post and we get people that are eligible to get hired right now. And then we try to streamline that process as quickly as we can. So we post for 21 days. And then the second one is we send letters, In those letters, we try to shorten our process more. We give them a test date and we give them 2 interview dates. And then we schedule it on our calendar so that we don't know exactly how many people we're going to interview, but we know the first date and the second date. And we make them pretty quick, but they all have to have a little pause in between them because they take the test. We have to wait for the test results to come back, and that takes about a week. We do our interview. At that interview, we give a PEP test, which helps us ask the right questions for the second interview. We have to wait for PEP test results to come back, and then we have to write up questions for the individuals. So it kind of gives us an idea of what the individuals feel about stealing and if they've done something in the past at a job that could get them fired. Questions like that we ask, and it helps us set up the questions for the second interview. So that process takes 35 days. Then we do our actual interviews based on the first interview, and then based on the first interview and the PEP test, we give a second interview and a physical agility. That takes about 28 days by the time that gets done. Then we start our background check, and we do an intensive background check on people. And we also do mandated drug screening, fingerprinting, and a psychological test. And that psychological test is what kind of makes that third step take the longest. We can get the background done usually quicker, but there's only a couple doctors that are licensed to do these psychological tests in Wisconsin for law enforcement. And it's a mandatory test that you have to give because of the state. And the reason being is you want to make sure that law enforcement officers that are carrying a gun out there are mentally stable and able to handle the job. So that whole process is kind of outlined here. And you can see if you start in the beginning of September, it's basically January before you can put anybody actually training. Then we have our whole training process that takes 14 weeks, right? So that's why we get these positions on payroll, but you know, they show up in the budget, but they're not really helping us fill staffing, and we still have overtime problems in our current way we do things because it takes them 14 weeks before we can actually get them trained to be able to handle dispatch and the jail and cover their own shifts. Okay. Now let's go to the colored sheet. The colored sheet, what we did is we listed all those openings that I told you about. The blue ones are new hires. The red ones are retirements that we anticipate in the next 3 years. The green ones are resignations, and the orange ones are people that quit or don't make the training. If we train 2 people at a time and we started hiring basically January 1st, it would take us until January of 2025 to get all of the people that we need trained up. And if you remember our jail, we started out with 8 positions on the new jail that we needed. And we brought that down to 5 positions, and we can run it with those 5 positions, but we can't run it if we're 3 or 4 of those 5 positions short. It's not going to happen. If we're 1 or 2 short, it's really not going to, it's not going to be efficient. And I don't know if we're going to have a lot of problems running it. Certainly when we open it, it's not an option to be short people. When we finally do start transitioning to that new building, what's going to happen is we're going to have to run our jail and we're going to have to run that new building simultaneously. Like dispatch is going to go over to the new building probably, and you're going to have 2 dispatchers while they're there. And we're going to have to run our current facility at the same time. The other things that come up is, okay, our staff is trained in the current facility they're in, but they need to be trained in the new facility. There's going to be, you know, everything's going to be computerized. The cells are going to open. There's going to be different policies with doing rounds. There's going to be, you know, they have to, every one of the staff members has to know which cells are capable of doing what. There's some positive pressure cells for people that are on special needs. They also have to know, what are we going to do when we have an inmate acting up in the middle of the night? Where do they go? You know, which cells can be used for certain problems. There's just a whole bunch of things they need to be trained on because it's a different situation than what we're in. Plus, we have to train the new people on, you know, our current facility, plus being able to work the new facility. That all make sense? If we don't have enough staff the consequences that's really not that's not an option. We got to have enough staff when this facility opens. You can imagine how outraged the public and how disappointed we all would be if we have this new facility and we can't staff it because we don't have enough people to staff it. And that is a possibility. That's what's happening to Brown County right now. Brown County, they have a facility big enough to, I don't know how many, they have a whole mess of inmates shipped out. And their facility would be able to accommodate most of those people that they have shipped out, but they don't have enough staff. They have to close pods down because they don't have enough staff to operate all these pods and have those people come in. So it really is important that, for one, we start hiring now and we make sure that we plan for openings and we hire people ahead of time when we can. What I mean by that is when we know that somebody puts their notice in, I'm going to be retiring in November 23rd, my anniversary date, 14 weeks before that, we would like to start someone. That doesn't mean start the hiring process. That means actually start someone 14 weeks before so that by the time they retire, we're full staffed again. We've ran that all through by Paul and Scott, and they understand it, and they have the money in the budget because we have whatever the positions that they cut or the money that they found that they talked about in all these meetings we've had. They have the money set aside and they're able to put that in staffing, and we could start ramping up our staffing right away. What we're hoping to do is ramp up our staffing by 2 people in January and 1 more person later in the year, not counting any openings that come that surprise us. In that case, we would like to, hire somebody as soon as possible. That's where that hiring freeze comes into play too, because you can see how long our process is for hiring somebody. I mean, September to January. And if we have to extend that by possibly 2 months, getting it before executive committee, right? It would have to go before because of the hiring freeze. That's really going to hamper our ability to react quickly when these openings come. And if we can't react quickly when the openings come, we're never going to be able to train enough people up to get this thing to have enough staff to open on time. So we're going to be talking about, I think we have to move on to 1, okaying starting to hire the new positions, and 2, maybe exempting the sheriff's department from that hiring freeze, or at least going through it and okaying the positions now so that we don't have to get in front of the committee every time and possibly extend our ability to react quickly. The other problem, if we waited till the end, you won't find enough qualified candidates. We put testing out there, we get 1 or 2 people usually. That's about average. We have had a hiring process where we really weren't comfortable with any of the people in it. And we have had some where we get more than 2, but that's what we're looking at in this environment in today's time. Can you think of anything I missed, Chris, explaining that?
Sorry, the only other thing that I noticed on the timeline is the 5 weeks of jail school that have to be completed for a new hire for the state jail certification that they need to get done.
So we get somebody trained in our department and we still have to hire that, or we still have to send them within a year.
Yes.
That's a mandatory jail school. We've been getting kind of lucky the last few hires because about half of our hires have been from Brown County and they have the jail school already, some of them. So we didn't have to send them to that 5 weeks. So it's something we kind of forget about. But that comes into play if we first hire somebody that's trained up on January of 2025. When that new jail opens, we're going to be sending people to that 5-week schooling already. Not, well, for the 5 weeks, they're gone. It's a full-time job.
I mean, let's say training is in March, but you hire them in January, they could work in that.
Yes.
Yeah, they can. Probably the biggest issue is that, so if you hire 5 people that are kind of, slinking up on each other, Now you've got to send 5 people to jail school for those 5 weeks, and it's only held twice a year, usually in January and then in June or July. So if you get 5 people, maybe 3 or 4 people that all have to go to jail school at the same time, now you're that many people short for 5 weeks.
What if you get in your hiring process, when you do your posting and you get 3 really good qualified candidates, but you only want to do 2? Isn't it worth doing 3, taking the 3 and somehow, some way tagging them? That I don't know how, I mean, again, this is a theoretical question, but you don't want to, because if you got 3 good qualified candidates, you hate to say to one of them, I'm sorry, we can't take you, knowing that he's going to go someplace else.
That's a very good point, and that's why we would like all of the money set aside for hiring the new positions put into the budget right away, so that we can react to those types of things. If we get that individual and we know that somebody's probably retiring in November, and we could start them, maybe even more than 14 weeks. If we could get, the money is there, right? It's set aside for the new jail. Why wait to start filling the positions? We think we should start and be able to react. And if that money was in there and we didn't have the hiring freeze, we would be able to react to that. Yeah, it's 600 and some thousand.
87,000.
It's gonna be this year's budget.
I'd have to go look at 23's budget. 'Cause I didn't even look at it last night, so.
We would like that set aside to be able to start hiring staff right away as we can. And we would like the hiring freeze to not apply for those new 5 positions and any subsequent positions that open up between now and the time the jail opens.
I mean,
Positions were all there.
you're looking at basically, yeah, there's 10 possible, but I mean, by your count, at best count, 15 that you may need. And I'm willing to bet that you're probably going to need closer to 18 than you are 15.
I think
Because
15 is
you're
somewhat
using,
conservative.
you're
but it's-
using a conservative number, and I let you know as well as I do that it never turns out that way.
That's why it's important to start hiring now and building up staff. And we're going to get into the transition team, but that's just another reason and a way that we can use people. I don't want to cover things too many times. I guess let's talk about that now. The way the transition team works is usually when you break ground, you start assigning officers to a transition team. And in talking with Nancy from the state, it sounds like we're looking at probably 3 officers we should assign. And what those officers do is they start coming to the meetings now. The meetings for the jail planning now are really diving into the nuts and bolts of, I'll just give you one example. We picked out doors and we said, these are the doors that we want on the cells. They're pretty standard door. And a couple people who actually came from Brown County looked at that and said, boy, it's really nice having here and there a door with this extra chute to put a tray in. When you have an inmate that throws things at staff, you can use this other type of door to put the tray in, and then they can get at the tray. So you don't have to open the door and worry about somebody throwing something at you. That's something we didn't think about in our current facility. And yeah, we could add a couple of those doors. That's a good idea. Another officer said the way Brown County was set up, they had the floor drains in the wrong spot. They should be right outside of the cell door. And however they are in Brown County isn't really the right spot. So they look at the plans and they're like, let's put those floor drains right here. That way, when somebody makes a mess or floods the cell or something like that, they can squeegee it out and the drain is right there. These are things that people that work in that environment every day know. Sometimes as simple as the width of the stairway is too narrow in most jails. And they know that from working in other jails. And they're like, we need to make that wider. It's not a huge cost to make it wider, but it's detrimental in operations for the next 50 years if it's not wide enough, right? Because you got to escort inmates down the steps sometimes when they're acting up, and you put them in cuffs upstairs. Brown County's steps are too narrow and they can't escort them. So they still have to let them walk down the steps with an officer behind them. Things like that. They come to these meetings and they know it. And we had a transitional team interviews. We asked everybody at the sheriff's department if they were interested in being in this transitional team. And our idea is we were going to pick certain individuals that would help us set the jail up the best. So it's nice to have these people from other agencies. It's also nice to have people from our agency that we know are very task oriented for things like we have to write all these new policies for the new jail. So we wanted people from our agency that would be really good at writing policies. And we also wanted people that really know our jail and know jailing, because some individuals from other agencies are, really they're kind of brand new officers even there. They have some operational knowledge, but maybe not any type of mid-management type knowledge. So we held these interviews, and we have people picked that we would like to take these positions. The issue with it is there's kind of consequences. So let's just use one of those individuals, is Chelsea Broomhall. Okay. She is a sergeant in our jail. She does a really good job. She's very good at writing policies, or she would be good at that. She's actually like our policy trainer right now. Chelsea would be really good, except when we have an opening on patrol, she's the next person in line seniority wise to apply for that position. And we usually move people out. We do seniority and qualifications at the same time. And once in a while, somebody bumps another person, but kind of it goes by seniority. Let's just say Chelsea she interviews and she's the person we pick. So now she would have an opportunity to go to patrol and become a union member. And a little bit of overtime rules change, holidays change a little bit. But she would start her union seniority. If she's on that transition team and she has to make a decision, basically, either I go to patrol and I start building my seniority there, or I pass it up and I stay on the transition team and somebody else moves in front of me. That would have consequences for the rest of her career if somebody moves in front of her, because seniority in the union starts the day you start working in it. So if she gets passed up and she decides she's going to stay in this transition team and somebody else passes her up, and then the new jail is built and she transfers to patrol, let's say 2 people jumped in front of her. Those 2 people get to bid on shifts before her every year for the rest of her career. So she would be crazy to stay in the jail and pass that opportunity up. So what we would like to do is create, because there's 3 positions, up to 3 additional union positions that we can put this in writing or whatever. We're okay with eliminating those positions after the jail is built when openings come up. Does that make sense to you? So if our transition team is from the jail and we create these 3 positions, they would start their union seniority, but they would keep working on that transition team. Once the new jail opens, we would have those 3 extra positions, but every time a patrol position opened or a union position opened, court security or investigator, those people that are already in the union would take that position and we would eliminate that union position. We would keep it as a jail position, but they wouldn't be union people anymore. Right now, we have 1 person in our jail that is in that position. It's called a transition officer. And the way we utilize that individual is they work in the jail, but if the jail has enough staffing and somebody on patrol gets hurt or abruptly quits, we can quickly move that person. They're trained already. So we move them to patrol to fill in, and that helps eliminate overtime. We want to keep that 1 position, but we wouldn't need the 3 positions. So we are also going to be asking for 3 additional transitional positions that are union positions until the jail is built. Does that make sense?
It makes a lot of sense.
Otherwise, we're not gonna get anybody, let's just say the 5 highest seniority people in the jail know that, okay, there's probably gonna be 5 retirements while this transitional team is going. I'm not gonna apply for the transitional team. So that eliminates our 5 most senior people in a way. That all makes sense? I'm explaining a lot. I mean, we put this on a whiteboard and drew it out to Scott and we explained all that to him and he's on board with all of it. So I'm trying to do it with, just by explaining things, but. So really, there's 3 things we're asking, and I don't know if we need motion. I'm assuming we need motions on these and they have to go up. That would be 1, allocate the money, that's 600 and some $1,000 that's already set aside to fill positions in the jail. We would like that set aside for staffing of the jail, starting in 2023 budget. We would we would like to not be part of the hiring freeze and we would like all of the current positions exempt from the hiring freeze and being able to just fill our current positions and those 5 additional. And then we would like to hire 3 transitional union positions that as the openings come up on patrol, we would like the ability to add 3 transitional positions to patrol with the understanding that we plan on eliminating those positions once the new jail is built and openings come through.
Okay, I'm just looking at the budget highlights right now for 2023. He does have in the $667,500. Okay,
But is that in for staffing of the sheriff's department
that's,
or is it set aside on its own?
that is additional jail staff will need to be hired, trained prior to the opening of the facility. Let's go.
I think Scott had said last night.
That was my understanding. That was my understanding also. Let's just hang tight.
At one point, Paul had the money set aside in the budget all by itself, and then we had that talk with him. The same, basically stuff that we just talked about. And my understanding was he was going to transfer it to employee wages where we could use it starting in January. But I'm not sure if that got done or not.
Bids actually come.
Yeah, that's the thing, until the bids come in. Sure that we're gonna go with the county. We don't even know it. We start hiring people and then also.
What I would say though is we have our retirements and for a short period of time, you have a little bit of extra staff. And when the retirements come, if you decide not to build the jail, then we would deal with it that way and we would either lay those people off before or likely there's going to be retirements. We're expecting a retirement in November and we're expecting 2 in January of the following year. So you'll know bids next spring. So by January of the following year, that's January, so that's 6 months from when the bids come out till we know we have 2 more openings. So if you hired 2 ahead of time, you could use those 2 in January. Wouldn't be the end of the world. And it's not like we don't have the money. We have it set aside already. The timeline, as I understand it, is about a year after the bid. So June of this year, a year after we decided to move forward. That's about when they anticipate possibly breaking ground. So those bids will have to be done by June. So they're probably going to go out for bidding something like March, I would guess, of 2020, next March. The bid should go out and by June of next year, we should know.
So you're contemplating that next year we have to add 3 to 4 people.
Yes.
Okay.
I would say we should continue job posting and sending letters and test interviews. That's 2 months. In the interim, we'll bring it to exec about the hiring freeze. You know, there's so much time in between starting posting and actually hiring.
I mean, the executive committee
exemptions.
decided to put the hiring freeze in. I
We are
don't,
actually in the
don't know
middle
that
of,
it hasn't gone to the county board, so it would take 11 on the county board to decide not to use a hiring freeze, whether they agree with that or not. But as of right now, that was a decision of the executive committee, but it may or may not be a good decision.
Well, this could be brought to the exec committee next month. You know, it could be put on the agenda if you want a motion on that.
Go ahead.
Okay, I make a motion, we bring this to the executive committee next month. Basically, your, union and what was the other part again?
the hiring
Work
freeze
with your transition team.
Yep.
and the
right?
transition team, the
yeah.
3.
Well,
union
let's do that in
positions.
2 separate motions. All right. First off, deal with the transition team. I think that we need to, this is my opinion. You tell me what you guys think, but I believe that the transition team should be eligible to be union positions, using the criteria that you've outlined, okay? So if you use that criteria with the transition team, that would allow that transition team to be eligible after the jail is built to then go into patrol jobs if they so choose. Is that what you're telling us?
I would like it worded a little different because we could use somebody from patrol on the transition team. But then we
That's
would
fine.
need somebody from the jail to fill their position. If we just kept it simple and said, we would like to authorize 3 current positions.
Why don't you
we'd like
do
to,
this? Why don't you
write it
put it in writing what you want? Then we'll insert that into the minutes, okay?
Okay.
And then that will become part of that resolution that you want to, or the motion you want to forward, right?
Yes.
Okay.
But in essence, it's the 3 additional union positions while the jail is being built.
Correct.
And the hiring freeze.
And then the hiring freeze would not go into effect for the
Future jail 5
for the
positions.
future jail positions. Okay,
Yep. Second.
and that was seconded by Doug. Any questions? Go ahead, Joe.
You said you want to create 3 additional union positions, but then you want to keep one of them union positions after for the transition, you said?
No, those 3 could be eliminated. We have one now that is a transition position.
Is that a union position?
Yeah.
Okay,
So
so that,
we will go from 3 back down to 1. Does that make sense? 3 while it's being built, and then we would eliminate them afterwards when the openings come.
I understand,
Any other comments? Okay, no other comments. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
I,
Opposed? Motion carried.
So I'll just put that wording together and then email it to everybody.
Correct. Okay, next.
So moving on, Our current, just to give you an idea of what's going on with the jail, our current jail cook is out on medical leave, one of the two. We've still been posting for a jail cook. We're not getting applicants. And we've been filling it with overtime or additional, whenever we can, and we have additional staff on and we can move staff around. We have staff cook while they're working. But when we can't, we have to call in our jailers and post it for overtime. That is becoming an issue. We're probably coming out worse than if we upped the pay of the jail cook, and that's coming up on an agenda item. We'll talk about it there. Review of overtime on category by category is what I got.
Sorry, what's the question? No, our head cook has the certification course of that safe serve certification. So the second cook does not need to have it. Yes.
But I did want to talk about that also. Oh, it's coming up. It's coming up. Never mind. Okay, so overtime. I told you I was pretty happy with how we're doing on overtime. If you look on the left, we got 2020, 2021, and 2022. We are high, and it shows that we're high in the budget. Our total hours without holidays are 1,729 hours. But you also have to take into account that we have 2 grants going on this year, one for speed enforcement and one for click it or ticket. And we have 440 hours of that. So that bottom line there where it says without grants, 1,289 hours. So in 2020, we're at 1,249, 2021, 1,226, and this year, 1,289, almost exactly where we've been the last couple of years. And that's taking into consideration that right column. We've been plenty of positions down, 6,427 hours down. And we've been able to fill most of that in with our current staffing. And only 1,289 hours of that has come into actual overtime. So our lieutenants, again, do a great job of moving people around in the schedule. Our sergeants on patrol do some moving around also. And, thank goodness we have staff willing to, a lot of that, some of that credit goes to staff too. Within 48 hours, we can't move staff around anymore. Their schedule is locked in. But commonly what we do if somebody calls in sick or something comes up that an individual is off, we call people and ask them to move. And a lot of times they work with us and they move when they can. So that covers a lot of overtime also. So I'm pretty happy with where we're at considering all the positions that we've had open this year. Any questions on the overtime? And then I handed out the average daily population of the jail. As you can see, we're at almost 30 people to this date of the year that we have average population, average daily population, the top line there. Any questions on the jail population?
Females are still being housed out of county.
There's actually something I wanted to cover with that too, and maybe Chris could speak better to this than I could, but we house females when we can out of county. Currently, what a situation that we can give you an example of how it could really hurt the county. We have an individual that's on probation. She's a female, and she got out of prison and she got on probation with us because she's from our county and she listed an address here, but really she was kind of homeless. And my understanding is she was living in Rock County and down south. She was a regular heroin user and she's pregnant with twins. She picked up new charges down there. And what happens is when you pick up new charges and probation and parole decided they're going to revoke her, she becomes our inmate because her last address and when she got out of prison was Kewaunee County. So we have to house her. Chris tried calling everywhere to see if they would take a heroin addict that's pregnant with twins, and no one will take her. So we've been housing her for about 3 weeks now. That means once she gets housed, she loses her, and this would be anybody, they lose their insurance through the state and they become our problem. So if there's medical bills, Kewaunee County has to pay those. She has gone to the hospital once or twice, I think, since she's been by us, and they haven't been real big bills. But the average, just a simple Google that I did, the average cost of a pregnancy is $25,000. The average cost of a twin pregnancy is $108,000. This is certainly not an average twin pregnancy. It would be much more than that. Chris was contacting probation and parole daily, trying to get her, she's revoking herself and trying to get her back in prison with a facility that could be adequately meet her needs. And probation and parole finally did complete their revocation. And I believe today, if Rock County doesn't pick her up, we're driving her there. Do you have anything to add to that?
No, that's what we're doing, is we're driving to Rock County today. 11 or 12 weeks now.
But you can imagine how the medical bills, if something happened, how the medical bills could pile up extremely quickly, and how Kewaunee County, all of a sudden, we could be in 100,000 on an inmate like that.
Now, does Rock County have to pick up the bill when she goes there, or is she going back to prison?
So on the revocation, we got the revocation paperwork. Now she's supposed to go back to prison. By the rules of the state, it's Rock County's court case that she went to prison originally on, but she's on supervision through probation and parole in Kewaunee. So until she's revoked, she's Kewaunee County's inmate. But once she's revoked, then she goes back to county of conviction, back to Rock County. So that's why we're taking her to Rock County, because we have the revocation paperwork. So we're basically washing our hands, giving her to Rock, and Rock has to set up transport arrangements with Tachita to get her back to prison.
Kind of goofy.
It is.
And they'll have medical staff on duty 24/7 at Tachita. So they can kind of meet her needs at their own facility to a point. I mean, I'm sure they don't do deliveries there. But. So we lucked out. But that's also why we need a new jail, because other counties just refuse to take people like that, you know. And it's not just the pregnant female. It comes up all the time where we have an inmate that is a nightmare in the jail, and other counties know that those individuals, and they just won't take them.
So, I mean, how do you, she has to be kept basically separate from all the other inmates.
So she's in a cell. The biggest problem that we have is the medical staff. We've only got a nurse that comes twice a week for 6 hours at a time. A doctor that's on call 24/7 comes to the jail once every 3 weeks. So any medical appointments, we have to take her out, but we don't have enough female staff. So we've had female staff filling shifts with overtime.
I can see where that's an issue.
That's one of the big considerations with the new jail. We have to hire a lot more female staff, because you have to have a male and a female on every shift, because we're going to be housing females.
All right.
All right. We'll talk about the new jail planning. I told you a little bit about what the meetings are like now, that we're really diving into the, the somewhat, I don't know if I want to call them minor, but the really meticulous things, colors of paint, things like that we talk about. And we kind of walk through different sections in each meeting and talk about how that would work, and look at things like drains and right down to, like, there's an area for cooking where you'll have a stove, and they talk about the normal stove and a griddle and the different things that go in a normal jail. We talk about the dishwasher, and they have high recommendations on certain ones that there's so many state mandates. And, you know, we almost need Nancy at these meetings because she'll tell you a dishwasher that gets up to 180 degrees costs $10,000 more, but the state doesn't come in and check it all the time as long as it's got sensors that it gets that high. So you save money other ways, things like that. We base decisions on what seems to be the, you know, the most financially responsible decisions. Along with that, we talk about our cooks and how much problems we've been having hiring cooks. And right now we're getting by with one hot meal, and our second hot meal is ramen noodles. And they basically heat it up in their cell with the sink. Nancy, our jail inspector, is not gonna let that go any longer. She's been letting it go. I think she'll let us finish off with our jail because we're so far along and we're building a new facility. But the new facility, we're gonna have to have 2 honest hot meals. So that means the cooks are gonna probably be close to doubled how many hours we need them. And not just doubled, but there's a ton of jail rules and laws like temperature of water, calorie intake, different things like that that come into play. And most jails go with a vendor. So they hire a company that specializes in that. That company hires a cook, and that cook comes in with all of the knowledge of that company and also using that company's food. We believe that that's something we're going to probably have to do with the new jail. Scott was planning on that. He was in the budgeting. He had the money for that. He was still hoping we would be able to keep our own hiring of county cooks, if I want to call them that. But with all the hardships we're having with hiring and the new jail and all of the requirements with knowing different calorie type intakes, sanitizing of different things, a whole new setup. I'm almost sure our cooks would not be interested in that, and we'd have to hire somebody new. So we're starting to look at vendors and try to figure out what that would cost. That seems to be the way we're probably. If we kept our own cooks at their current wages, that was kind of a bad number because there's no way they can stay at their current wages and their current hours in that new jail, knowing that Nancy's gonna, and if it's not Nancy, it's gonna be a different jail inspector, but that's kind of a standard thing with 2 hot meals a day. I'm sure if somebody else took her job, it would be the same thing.
Not the food. We can charge a daily housing fee, kind of like as a pay for stay or Huber inmate, but they have to be sentenced. If they're pre-sentenced, we can't charge them.
The one thing we would be able to possibly, and we're open to this, once the jail's running and things are going, sometimes like old folks homes and stuff, we'll contract with local jails and have them make the meals for them. And we don't have the facility to do that now, but I believe we've already been contacted by someone in our current facility asking if we would be able to do that.
Yes, yeah, they did contact us and we don't have the room yet.
But that might help offset the cost of that permanent jail cook if we could pick up a couple places like that we would make the meals. Because we would do that at a slight profit. Any other questions on the new jail and where we're at with that? I think it's just blown heat.
Yeah.
I think it's just blown heat. There's a big discussion right now. They had the original plans, a separate corner of the building, I'll call it, or a knockoff of the building, that they were gonna put heating and air conditioning in. And now they're talking about putting it above the officer station in the pod. So there is part of that second floor that we weren't planning on building out. It just wasn't gonna be built out. And they're looking at cost of each and which one is cheaper. And I think they're leaning, they were pricing that out. I think they're leaning towards putting it above the pod and blowing the hot air down essentially. That would be the cheaper route, but they're gonna do whichever one's cheaper. That would shrink the size of the building, but increase the size of the second floor. If that makes sense. And we plan on going with whichever one's cheaper. Anything else? And they know what they're doing, but there's also other things like your positive pressure cells. And I don't know how that probably all works on that same duct work base. Yeah. A certain amount of cells you have to pump clean air into basically if somebody has COVID or tuberculosis or whatever it might be.
Next,
Okay, moving on, department spotlight. So I guess what I want to talk about this month is we had a problem with inmates flushing underwear and t-shirts and stuff like that down the toilet. And sometimes they would plug up right away and flood their own cell and we'd be able to know who did it. But what was increasingly happening is it was making it further in the ductwork and it was flooding a number of cells instead of just that one. And then we were unable to trace it back to which inmate it was. And our maintenance department was up in arms over this. And, you know, they go through all this work of finding a pair of underwear in the middle of these, this old ductwork cast iron stuff and cleaning it out. It's a terrible job. I'm sure it's messy, it's dirty. And then we don't find anybody responsible for it. Lieutenant Van Aram came up with the idea of if we issued undergarments to everybody in the jail, we would have an accounting for them. So you give them 2 pairs of underwear, you get 2 pairs of underwear back. If those underwear are gone, obviously they went somewhere. So they're probably in the ductwork and we'd be able to find the inmate responsible for flooding and, you know, in theory, charge that person for it. You know how that works sometimes with people that don't have money. So he purchased undergarments and different sizes and stuff and came up with a system and issued them out. And that's been going on now for over a half a year, I think. And we haven't had any issues with anybody flushing anything and no more issues with flooding. So that saves maintenance. It saves, you know, the cost of the flooding, the things that are damaged and not being able to find the individual responsible. So that was a great program that really helped out the county at very minimal cost of ordering a little bit of undergarments for people. And it makes it safer in getting stuff in the jail because we used to allow them to bring underwear in from outside the jail, even in a sealed package. I mean, you know how much fentanyl it takes to get high? Like needle of a pin. You could, you know, a staff member could easily miss a tiny hole in something like that, that somehow they got drugs into it or something like that. So we have a much better system now that we don't have to worry about those things. So congratulations to Chris on implementing that and having it work out so well. Alternate work site and policy discussions. I guess if you don't want me to talk about them, I kind of piped up at the finance meeting and said what a nightmare that would be for the sheriff's department when they said, we want you to track everybody that works from home. Our lieutenants take calls daily at home. Our investigators, our patrol officers get calls, not just from the sheriff's department, but from the courts. I don't know how we could even track that. Like if the court system calls an officer at home, and luckily most of our officers don't put in for overtime for that stuff. It's kind of a unwritten rule if you want. The investigators, if they're just answering questions and they can talk somebody through a problem, they usually just donate that time. If they're on the phone and they have to talk somebody through a search warrant and it takes a couple hours, they put in for that overtime if it takes something like that for sure. So, but we work from home or alternate work sites all the time. And when you look at the black and white language that you can't work from alternate work sites, I don't even know what that means. Like our work site in the county sometimes is a scene up in Dykesville. And very commonly, officers are doing things like, I used to work in the Door Kewaunee Drug Task Force. You're in Door County for court and you're sitting around all day for court. You bring your computer with you and you work from Door County courtroom or the sheriff's department or a room in the courtroom, and you get stuff here done when you're up there. So certainly we want to allow alternate work sites. We don't have any regular where we would request somebody to work from home on a regular basis, but certainly having that option. We have 2 secretaries. Probably their biggest job is typing reports. Officers dictate reports and they type them up and fix grammar and stuff like that. If one of our secretaries had, I don't know, a child that broke a leg, the other secretary either would be paid overtime to make up because they wouldn't be able to keep up on the workload, or we could allow somebody to work from home and we could email those reports and they could type them up and send them back. They wouldn't be able to do any of the other work that we have probably, or very little of it, but certainly the typing of the reports you could do at home just as easily as you could at work. It's something we would want to be able to react to on a short notice if something like that happened. If you take away the ability for alternate work sites, that would take away that ability for us to react quickly to an emergency situation like that came up to. Okay, I'll quit talking about that because we know that's still on a different committee's agenda, but all of the consequences of eliminating something without looking at the ramifications of it, or not understanding the ramifications everywhere. And then we have on the agenda, the discussions of the cook's wages. Currently, our cooks make, our backup cook makes $16.75 an hour, and our main cook makes $17.32 an hour. The main cook works 4 hours a day and the backup cook works 3 hours a day. Is that correct?
Yeah, for 7 days out of every 2 days. So 28 versus 21 hours every 2 weeks.
That second cook, essentially, you might as well say we posted almost all of last year, and we had a couple different people come in and fill, but they either quit or our current one is on medical leave. We're hoping she comes back, but obviously we're not 100% sure. And the main cook making $17 an hour, we've been lucky she's staying and everything. I think it would be cost effective for us to raise those wages a couple dollars an hour in the hopes that we get somebody else to apply versus what we're doing right now and filling it with overtime of our current jail wages. Financially, I think it would make sense. I'm not sure that would lure more people, but the problem is, let's look at that $16.75 an hour. If that was somebody we know that was thinking about applying for that, essentially you work every other day. I mean, it's a pattern, but let's just say you work every other day. Sometimes it's 3 days in a row. Every other weekend, for sure, you have to work. And at $16 an hour, if you live very far outside of Kewaunee, with gas prices, it takes you, let's just say it takes you 3 gallons of gas to come in. That's basically an hour's worth of wages. Now you work 3 hours for $30 and you got to give up every other weekend for that $30 a day. That's why we're having so many problems competing with other people that are trying to hire.
Is it hours or pay? Because very few people only want to work 3 hours. And make some money. Because the number of people are.
We talked about that. There's not a lot of extra duties that we can give them to add hours. We do think that we have an option of adding like an hour a day. So what we would like to do is interview people and, kind of give them an option of possibly
Some cleaning or something like that.
yeah, that's what we would have them do.
Can they do laundry?
Not really in our current setup. The laundry is at the opposite end of the jail. You have to go through the whole jail to get there. Our staff does a good job of keeping up with laundry. I don't know if
I
you want to
mean,
talk to it more
once-
than that.
Once we go to the new facility, is that something you can look at? Is that the cook could also do the laundry service and then give them pay them on a 8-hour basis?
Well, and I don't know, I was an officer and I did laundry myself and I don't think it's a good idea to, you know, have laundry and food service together. There's typically in the laundry, there's things that you don't want to be brought in the kitchen. If that makes sense. Yeah.
But if you could find somebody that has an awesome full-time job.
What commonly works with vendors though, and the way the jail is set up, a vendor would bring in a jail cook that would supervise the laundry, inmates doing the laundry on kind of through one set of windows. And on the other set of windows, they would supervise the cooking. So obviously they would concentrate most of their time in the cooking, but they would be able to observe, and officers doing rounds and officers in main control would be observing an inmate doing laundry in the new facility. In our facility, that just doesn't work. We can't give access to inmates where we do our laundry. So even if we have an inmate that we can't trust an inmate where our laundry is in the current facility.
Okay,
So possibly the more hours, but if we upped the wages a couple dollars an hour on cooks, maybe that would help us hire too. Otherwise, the consequence is we fill it with overtime. How do you feel about the idea of upping the wages for the cooks?
Yeah, I don't remember how much. I think it was like $1, maybe $1.50.
It was like as much as Scott thought he could without it. It was like moving them up the scale, but not actually having to get it approved. It's just our committee.
That's $3 more a shift.
You know, are you gonna go like, what are you gonna do? 20 and 18? They're not really. For a part-time gig, I mean, well, yeah, it's not all to make money.
who isn't?
All you can make money, you know, part-time, not 3 hours. Or
Yeah.
it's something that they wanna do. Part-time, can't find it. That's. But I would think that going 20 and 18 probably would be. Not the same. I mean, if you think that that's kind of.
I think we'd have a
I
better
think that
chance.
now with overtime, so it doesn't
Yeah,
matter.
right. Right.
I'm not saying that's gonna solve the problem though. No, I think for sure. They gotta work.
But if you $20, I mean, yeah, I mean, seriously, all it is, you don't hire, they keep telling people $20. It's crazy. And if they're not, they're gonna tell you every day. You just need a motion to. Change.
Let's move.
We'd go to
why don't-
finance,
Why don't
I
we do
believe.
that? Let's make a motion and send it to finance. All right, finance has a meeting the end of the month. What is it, 23rd? We've got a meeting the 23rd. That would be a Friday, the 23rd, finance has a meeting. Make a motion, send it to finance. And who made the motion? Doug, seconded by Scott Yankee or Brown. Whoever you write down, that's who it is. Any more discussion on that? Hearing no discussion, all those in favor signify by saying aye. All right. And I will contact Tom to put it on the agenda. Okay, anything else? Chris, you haven't said a whole lot.
I guess the only thing I'd add about the jail cook is when we were taking applications, the biggest issue was lack of benefits. It's a part-time position and the county was saving money on the part-time positions. But we had probably more than a half a dozen people that did apply for the part-time jail cook. But every time they heard that there were no benefits, and they chose not to take the position. And that kind of leads into hiring a food service vendor for the new jail. Is that the hiring of all their employees is basically that company's responsibility. They have to staff it. So that's one of the big benefit of having a vendor.
And you're gonna check that out, see where our costs are compared to the current setup?
I did talk to one of the food service vendors, their sales rep, and they gave me a sample RFP. Basically, what they have to do is the county has to submit an RFP so they can bid on that contract. And it's all even across the board. These are the number of hot meals. This is the type of food. Food is different quality. So they have to know kind of basically, spoon to spoon, this contractor versus that contractor, they're all bidding on the same thing. So
The cost per inmate a day, I know it's cheap now.
right now it's really cheap with serving ramen noodles at 10 cents a pack for as a hot meal. That's really cheap. I think I'd have to figure it out again, but I think it only came out to around $2 a meal. No, I haven't heard of any other jail being that close and being that low.
Well, you have to serve 2 meals a day in new jail, right?
Yes.
Hot meals.
We're supposed to serve 2 by state statute. It's 2 hot meals a day. And we've kind of gotten by on, saying ramen noodles is a hot meal. Is it really not? Really, along with the high sodium, it's not really good for the dietary statement that we have to have every year for the jail. And it's, is it really a legitimate hot meal? I don't think so.
And then you're gonna have to also meet a certain calories per day, I'm sure,
Yes.
and everything else that you're not probably meeting now.
Actually, we are. We have to have a dietary statement handled. Rachel provides us with a dietary statement based on our meal plan. We do meet the calorie intake, but there's some concerns over the sodium and some of the foods that we use as being a little bit unhealthy, especially for people that may have pre-existing health conditions, such as heart problems or things without sodium.
All right. Any other questions for either Chris or for Jason?
Is there any cost? Public school.
We've looked into that. I think Chris can answer.
So we had reached out to a couple different places in the past. The schools, I don't believe that they could, for whatever reason, they have requirements that they could not provide us meals. We reached out to Door County, to Brown County jails. They have to meet the same requirements as us. Plus, we also have religious diets and other special diets that we have to meet that schools may not have to combine to. But then you get into probably the transportation costs. Now you got to have your food service card that's insulated, get it hot to the jail. Now we're responsible for having it at a certain temperature when we serve that food to the inmate, which makes it more difficult.
Essentially, it's too far for it to be cost efficient when you look at other jails doing it. It's funny, other places can't make food for jails, but jails can make it for other places. The jail would be able to supply hot food for folks' homes, but they wouldn't be able to do it for the jail. There's too many requirements the requirements are crazy when you start. I don't even know about them, but they were talking about dishwashers. And
Yeah, you-
I was like lost, like you can get this dishwasher, but then you gotta have it cleaned twice a month and you gotta have, this kind of light on it and or you can get this kind of dishwasher that gets up to this temperature and then you don't need those things. The requirements are different if it hits a certain temperature. There's all these state requirements that are just crazy. I don't know if we want any special cookies coming in.
You know?
Okay, let's move on. Scott tells me he's got some trees to come down today. So, our next meeting is scheduled for the 14th, I believe. 12th? Yes, you're right, 12th. We have nothing down for the November meeting, and being as how November, we will be passing a budget. We may be short on items for that meeting. And I might look at even not having meeting in November, unless you guys want to meet. It's up to you. What's that? Depending on what's going on. If we do have a meeting in November, chances are real good that our vice chairman is going to have to host it. Because I won't be close by, let's put it that way. So we'll look at that as time progresses. Is there any other issues come up? Anything to discuss? Pardon? Travels, yeah, anybody going? You going anyplace? You are? Oh, go for it.
Yeah, so Jeb and I will be attending the Wisconsin Emergency Management Association Conference next week, in which we're going to be attending some training. So obviously that we've got the integrated public alert warning system pre-conference training that's being provided. And there is an incident command system, emergency operations center interface that's going to be held on the final day, along with information being presented by Wisconsin Emergency Management that usually relates to our plan of work.
Okay.
And it's in Stevens Point.
All right. Have a good time. Chris, you going anyplace?
No, no.
A building over on Juno?
Yep, 2 blocks away.
All right. Okay. Hearing nothing else, we have a motion to adjourn by Joe and seconded by Doug. All right. All those in favor signify by saying aye. 9:48.